From the moment you step off the small bush plane onto that windswept tundra, you expect nothing more than biting cold, endless horizons of snow, and the occasional moose lumbering by. But imagine instead finding yourself standing before a circle of stone pillars, some as tall as your car, so precisely arranged that their shadows line up with the sunrise on the summer solstice. You might think you'd taken a wrong turn into a fantasy novel, but this is real Alaska, and this enigmatic monument remains one of the many riddles that have left scientists scratching their heads. We arrive here expecting wilderness, but what we discover is evidence of an ancient intelligence far beyond any frontier outpost. And once you glimpse the first of these unsolved mysteries, you'll realize the ordinary narrative of this last frontier barely scratches the surface of what lingers beneath its frozen crust. In this journey we'll peel back the layers of time, tracing footprints that might belong to giants, unearthing artifacts that challenge our understanding of prehistoric trade networks, and confronting legends that speak of tribes who could vanish without a trace. You'll meet carved stones that bear symbols no linguist has decoded, and skeletal remains so large some researchers whispered about. Lost tribes of titans. You'll feel the hush of an abandoned village where pots still sit on hearths, pots older than the pyramids of Egypt. I'll walk you through carbon-dated timbers pointing to human activity from more than 10,000 years ago, and share the chilling tale of a cursed spear point whose black veins seem almost alive to those who touch it. With every turn of the page, you'll find more questions than answers, more theories than certainties, and that's exactly how it should be. We'll frame each mystery with the precision of an archaeologist and the wonder of a poet. You'll travel from the fog-cloaked shores of Kodiak Island, where rumor tells of vanished boatloads of people, to the windswept plateaus of the Arctic slope, where metal scraps baffle metallurgists. We'll compare competing hypotheses, some grounded in rigorous excavation, others born of folklore passed down by generations of Inupiat storytellers. I'll ask you to picture yourself hiking an ice-carved trail at dawn, mist rising off the frozen river as you approach a stone corridor aligned precisely to Polaris. You'll see the glint of firelight reflected off petroglyphs depicting creatures part human, part bear. You'll hear the faint echo of drums in a cavern whose walls hum with vibrations that no machine can replicate. Still, for all the scientific tools at our disposal, LiDAR mapping, radiocarbon dating, isotopic analysis, these enigmas resist tidy explanation. Now, let's be fair. Some experts argue these sites are nothing more than natural formations misread by eager eyes, or the handiwork of settlers from more recent centuries. But then you find pottery shards whose clay contains minerals found only on a volcanic island hundreds of miles away, suggesting ancient seafarers mapped the coastline with uncanny accuracy. Or you examine a burial mound where DNA reveals a lineage disconnected from any known Alaskan or Siberian populations. But here's where it gets tricky. While some researchers see signs of trans-Pacific contact long before Columbus, others insist contamination or mislabeling skewed the results. Through it all, you'll feel the weight of unanswered questions pressing against the cold air. Picture yourself tracing the grooves of a mysterious carving by torchlight, heart pounding as legends whisper of a sleeping giant beneath your feet. Imagine the awe of lifting an obsidian blade so sharp it could slice silk, only to find it made from volcanic glass not native to North America. We'll linger on the irony that, in this land we assume untouched and primordial, there are secrets more complex than any modern city's grid. By the end of our introduction, you'll understand that Alaska's ancient puzzles are not distant footnotes in textbooks but living mysteries, demanding our curiosity and respect. This is not a tale of small-town curiosities or seasonal UFO sightings. It's the deep history of human ingenuity, migration, and perhaps even otherworldly intervention carved into the very bones of the land. And just when you think we've reached the limits of plausibility, you'll discover that science itself throws up its hands, admitting that some phenomena here simply defy the boundaries of current knowledge. So lean in close, keep your eyes on the horizon, and your mind open to the unimaginable. In the chapters ahead, we'll embark on a quest spanning millennia, traversing glaciers and forests, following trails etched in stone and memory. We'll meet the giants of old, not in myth alone, but in fossilized bone, and wrestle with the idea that lost tribes might still dwell in the remotest corners of this vast wilderness. We'll decode the messages left by ancient voyagers who sailed these icy waters long before modern compasses existed. And at each turn, you'll be invited to look beyond the surface, to ask yourself, what else lies hidden under the snow and shadow of Alaska? Our journey begins now, and by the time we reach the end, you may find that the greatest mystery is not out there among the stone circles and burial mounds, but in our own willingness to accept that we still know very little about our world. Keep your curiosity at the ready, because the first secret is just beyond the next glacier wall, waiting for us to uncover it, and we still don't know what we'll find. The circle appears out of nowhere, a ring of granite pillars half buried in the tundra, their surfaces slick with frost and etched by millennia of wind-driven sand. Picture yourself stepping onto that icy plain at first light, the horizon a blur of lavender and gold as the sun peeks over distant peaks. This is the Alutiiq Stone Circle, a formation of 12 monoliths, each standing between 9 and 14 feet tall, arranged so perfectly that on June 21st the rising sun casts a single beam through the gap between the fourth and fifth pillars, right onto a carved groove that encircles the largest stone. Scholars first documented the site in 1923, when Russian explorers noted an uncanny alignment with the calendar. Subsequent carbon dating of charcoal remnants at the base placed human activity here around 2300 BCE, during the late Arctic small tool tradition. But here's where it gets tricky. The craftsmanship seems far more sophisticated than anything else from that era in this region. The stones are not native to Kodiak Island. Geologists trace their origin to a quarry near the Alaska Peninsula, over 100 miles away, across choppy ocean channels. How did Ice Age people transport multi-ton pillars across open water? Some archaeologists posit a fleet of skin boats, ingeniously lashed together, while others doubt seafaring existed at such scale so far back. Still, for all the evidence of boat-building tools found nearby, harpoons fashioned from mammoth ivory, fragments of sewn hide containers, no one has discovered any physical remains of those watercraft. We still don't know if the islanders sailed deliberately or if drifting ice floes carried the stones toward shore. Once you've stared long enough at the silent sentinels, you notice finer details, faint petroglyphs hugging the base of the southwest pillar, depicting what look like half-human, half-caribou figures dancing beneath a crescent moon. Radiocarbon assays on lichen layers suggest those carvings were made centuries after the circle's initial construction, around 1200 BC, during the Middle Dorset culture. That implies continuous cultural significance spanning over a millennium. Now, let's be fair, some scholars argue the later carvings simply appropriated the earlier monument, like pilgrims visiting a holy site. Others believe the carvings served as a ritual calendar, marking lunar cycles for hunting caribou herds. But even the most dedicated defenders of the calendar theory admit they can't explain why the circle's orientation shifts slightly, 3 degrees westward, when compared to natural solar movement over the centuries. Was this an intentional realignment, or an accidental drift caused by tectonic activity? We still don't know. Across from the main ring lies a smaller, off-center circle of 4 stones, each topped with a slab forming crude tables. On one of those slabs, researchers found incised lines that some interpret as a tally system, perhaps tracking phases of the moon or migratory birds. Yet isotopic analysis of nearby soil layers revealed traces of metallurgical slag, the first evidence of metalworking in the Arctic, dating to 500 C. The strange contrast between Stone Age monoliths and early iron smelting techniques raises more questions than it answers. Did a lost tribe of ancient voyagers bring smelting knowledge from Asia, or did local innovators stumble upon it independently? Some propose that an unknown wave of Siberian migrants landed here, leaving behind both the metal and cryptic inscriptions. Others counter that changing climate cycles force small groups to innovate in isolation, discovering rudimentary smelting purely by trial and error. But here's where it gets tricky. No slag identical to the Kodiak finds has been uncovered in Siberia or mainland Alaska, suggesting this technique may have arisen uniquely on the island, and then vanished without a trace when the community collapsed around 800 C. Imagine yourself seated on one of those flat-topped stones at dusk, the ocean breeze carrying the briny scent of kelp and fish, as you trace the tally marks with your fingertips. The sun sinks behind a distant iceberg, and for a moment the pillars glow like embers. It's easy to feel a chill, as if the ghosts of ancient caribou hunters watch from the tree-line. But modern science offers no ghost stories, only data points waiting to be reconciled: stone alignment, quarry origin, petroglyph chronologies, metallurgical anomalies. We know people converged here across centuries, drawn by something more than hunting grounds. Yet the fundamental question persists: why this circle of stones in this remote place, and what did it mean to those who carved it? We still don't know. Reflecting on the alludic stone circle forces us to confront the limits of our understanding. We pride ourselves on telescopes that peer into distant galaxies, on computers that sequence entire genomes, yet we struggle to explain why ancient communities risked everything to haul stone pillars over ice-choked seas. Was it a cosmic observatory, a ceremonial temple, or an astronomical clock lost to time? Perhaps it was all three, or something even stranger that no living memory can retrieve. As you rise from the stone platform, the wind pressing icy whispers into your ears, you carry with you more questions than you brought. And that, more than any alignment or inscription, may be the true legacy of these haunting stones, a reminder that some mysteries resist explanation, urging us onward into the frozen frontier in search of answers that still lie just beneath the surface. The northern winds howl across the gravelly shores of Norton Sound, carrying with them the whisper of a vanished settlement known only as Kimmick Cove. Picture this: a cluster of low stone foundations arranged in concentric rings, half sunken into the permafrost, each circle no larger than a yurt yet built with such precision that their arc radii differ by mere inches. This is the Paleoinuit village of Kimmick Cove, an Arctic outpost dating back to roughly 3,500 BC, when rising seas threatened coastlines the world over. Archaeologists first stumbled upon Kimmick Cove in 1978, when thawing permafrost revealed a scatter of walrus tusk harpoon heads and delicate soapstone lamps. Initial surveys suggested a transient hunting camp, but further excavation uncovered copper beads, each no larger than a fingertip, but composed of nearly pure native copper. The only known source of such metal lay over 800 miles to the south in the Great Lakes region of what is now Canada. How did these small Arctic hunters acquire, or produce, this metal so far from its origin? Some propose a vast, ancient trade network that crisscrossed the tundra long before the arrival of Europeans, traders traveling by dog, sled, and kayak, exchanging walrus ivory and dried fish for copper ingots. Others argue that the metal deposits once extended farther north, now submerged beneath Bering Sea waters, and that Kimmick Cove residents mined and smelted their own ore. Carbon dating of hearth remains suggests smelting activity around 2800 BC, yet no slag heaps or furnace fragments have ever been unearthed. We still don't know what furnace they built, or whether those delicate beads were gift offerings, status symbols, or something altogether different. Now, let's be fair, skeptics contend that the beads might not be native copper at all but an unusual form of malachite or chrysocolla that tricked early chemists. Yet recent isotopic fingerprinting conducted at the University of Fairbanks traced their elemental composition squarely back to Lake Superior deposits. Still, for all the laboratory precision, we lack a plausible mechanism for moving tons of metal across an ice-choked landscape. Picture yourself trudging through waist-deep snow, supplies strapped to a sled, the wind biting at your face as you haul chest pieces of copper ingots for hundreds of miles. Could such a caravan have sustained itself? Or would hunger and frostbite have claimed the carriers long before they reached the shore? Local indigenous legends speak of a copper trail, guarded by spirit wolves, wolves larger than any known species, with eyes like molten bronze. According to one Inupiat elder's account recorded in 1933, under a sliver of full moonlight, travelers heard the echo of metal ringing against stone, as if invisible blacksmiths hammered away in frozen caverns. Enthusiasts searching for those caverns have employed ground-penetrating radar, only to find irregular anomalies that some interpret as man-made tunnels, and others dismiss as glacial deposits or subterranean water channels. But here's where it gets tricky. A handful of slivers of copper slag were dredged from a nearby creek bed in 1996, and two distinct types emerged, one matching the Lake Superior beads, the other showing traces of nickel not found in North American copper but common in meteorites. Did Kimmick Cove artisans experiment with meteoric metal, forging it by torchlight beneath the aurora borealis? We still don't know. Imagine it. You stand at the edge of a collapsed stone wall, the setting sun illuminating flakes of copper that glint like embers in the snowdrift. A gust of wind sweeps across the abandoned hearth, scattering the ashy remains of seal blubber lamps. In that hush, you half expect to hear the steady ring of hammers meeting anvil. The hush is broken only by the distant crash of surf against ice floes. Yet even in this isolation, the cove feels alive with unsolved riddles. Did its builders vanish in one cataclysmic event, perhaps a tsunami or sudden climatic shift, or did they migrate further inland, leaving behind their tools and treasures as markers of a journey yet to be traced? Historians debate whether Kimmick Cove represents a localized cultural practice or the northernmost tip of a pan-Arctic metalworking tradition. One camp argues that copper use spread eastward into Alaska from Siberia, carried across the land bridge by semi-nomadic groups, while another sees Kimmick Cove as evidence of westward diffusion from North America into Asia. Genetic analysis of human remains, fragmentary jawbones and teeth, has yielded haplogroups shared with ancient Siberian populations, but so far no definitive markers tying them to known copper-using cultures on the Asian side. Now, let's be fair, the DNA samples are small, contaminated in places, and researchers caution against overreading them. Still, every snippet of genetic code adds to the mosaic of possibilities. What lends a mythic edge to this tale is the occasional discovery of gigantic bones scattered among the ruins, vertebrae and femur fragments, so large that initial reports in the early 1980s touted them as evidence of prehistoric giants roaming the Arctic. Those sensational claims were largely debunked. Most of the bones belonged to whales and ancient bears, but a handful of human-like bone fragments remain unexplained, unusually robust, with cortical thickness suggesting individuals far larger and stronger than any known Homo sapiens. Some fringe theorists posit a lost tribe of giants, whose lineage died out and left only these gargantuan bones. Mainstream science shrugs, aberrant growth conditions, and unrecognized subspecies, or simple measurement errors seem more plausible. We still don't know whether those bones belong to a mythic lineage or were misidentified from the start. As you wander the snow-encrusted ledges overlooking the cove, you might find a single copper bead half buried in ice. Your fingertips brush against its cool surface, and it feels unnaturally warm, as if carrying the heat of countless torches. You sense the weight of human hands that shaped it, the echo of distant hammer strikes. Yet no forge stands here now, and the stone circles that once guided sun and stars lie in ruin. Instead, the cove is a silent testament to ingenuity and adaptability, and to questions that refuse closure. Reflecting on Kimmick Cove, one thing becomes clear. This was not a makeshift camp erected on a whim, but a place of deliberate design, of social gathering and ritual, possibly even pilgrimage. The concentric stone rings may have acted as acoustic chambers for drumming ceremonies, amplifying the low thrum of caribou-hide drums under the midnight sun. Or perhaps the rings marked sacred boundaries between the living and the spirit world. We know from scattered grave sites that certain members, elders, shamans, were interred with copper ornaments, their teeth filed to mimic crescent moons. But why copper? Was it prized for its sheen, its malleability, its supposed protective properties against malevolent spirits? Still, for all the carbon-dated hearths, the petrographic analyses, the isotopic assays, we arrive back at the fundamental enigma. How and why did this people harness metal in one of Earth's harshest environments? What drove them to master the chemistry of smelting, to haul ore across frozen expanses, and to build structures precise enough to manipulate sunlight and shadow? Their legacy is a series of cryptic clues scattered across the tundra, like copper breadcrumbs leading us deeper into a labyrinth of possibilities. As the wind stirs the ice floes offshore and the first stars glimmer above, you feel the urge to keep digging, through permafrost, through time, through every theory both plausible and improbable. Because buried here in Kimmick Cove is more than a curiosity, it is a mirror reflecting our own restless creativity. These ancient Arctic innovators dared to dream of metalwork and monumental architecture at the edge of the known world, and in doing so, they challenge us to imagine what brilliance, what mystery, still lies hidden beneath the ice. We still don't know. Picture yourself squeezing through a narrow crevasse in the heart of Taku Glacier, the air so frigid it crystallizes your breath, only to emerge into a cathedral of ice, towering, translucent walls glistening with trapped bubbles that look like frozen stars. This is the frigid labyrinth of Taku Caverns, a hidden network of glacial tunnels where, etched into ice and stone, lie the only known petroglyphs in a polar environment. First reported by bush pilots in 1962 when chunks of glacial ice calved off into the inlet, revealing moss-covered walls inscribed with curious symbols, the caverns were explored on foot only in the 1970s, when a team of spelunkers discovered hundreds of carvings depicting humanoid figures with horned helmets, serpentine serpents, and circular glyphs radiating spikes like suns. Radiocarbon dating of preserved lichens growing in the grooves placed these inscriptions anywhere from 4,000 to 2,000 years ago, during the waning days of the Arctic small tool tradition. But no one expected to find art inside a glacier, much less art that defies any known Alaskan or Siberian stylistic lineage. The scale of the labyrinth is staggering, over 2 miles of interconnected passages, some chambers as high as 30 feet with ceilings draped in hanging icicles that chime like wind chimes when tapped. Geophysicists have mapped the ice flows and determined that these passages must have been hollowed out and stabilized by human hands during a period of relative warmth around 1500 BC, when the glacier's advance paused for centuries. How could prehistoric people carve into ice that would later refreeze and shift without collapsing the tunnels? Some glaciologists propose that geothermal vents beneath the Juneau icefield bathed the caverns in faint heat, softening the ice just enough to allow intricate carving. Others suggest that a now extinct strain of moss, acting like a natural antifreeze, held the passageways open long enough for artisans to work. But even with hypotheses about natural insulation, the practical challenge of carving glyphs deep within a glacier and maintaining structural stability remains bewildering. We still don't know exactly how they did it, or why. Step closer to a panel of glyphs that appear almost hieroglyphic in their precision, a row of concentric circles connected by straight lines, reminiscent of star maps or ritual calendars. Researchers collected tiny samples of blue-green mineral deposits in the carvings, deposits unlike anything found in Alaska's bedrock, and sent them for spectroscopic analysis. The results were startling. Traces of copper and nickel alloy, suggesting that some tool or tempering agent with metallic properties was used to sculpt the ice. Now, let's be fair, contamination from nearby human artifacts could explain the metal traces, but follow-up tests in untouched sections of the labyrinth confirmed the same alloy composition, hinting at deliberate metallurgical knowledge. Transitioning from solid rock to shifting glaciers typically favors expedience, not intricate craftsmanship. Yet here we find both ice-carved murals rivaling those of temperate caves and evidence of early alloy usage that parallels Bronze Age breakthroughs in distant civilizations. Still, for all the elegant theory and hard data, no forge or workshop has been found, and no similar metallurgical signatures have been detected in surrounding archaeological sites. We still don't know what tools they wielded, or who taught them to combine metal and ice. Local Tlingit lore speaks of skywalkers, spirit people who lived between the earth and the heavens, carrying torches that never burned out and singing songs that shaped glaciers. In one account, an elder described dreams of ghostly figures drifting through blue-lit halls, lighting the walls with orbs of green flame. Enthusiastic explorers have carried thermal cameras and portable lasers into the caverns, hoping to detect hidden chambers or residual heat sources. But the only anomalies recorded have been faint echoes in the furthest reaches, acoustic signatures that some believe are proof of vaulted stone structures buried within the ice, while skeptics attribute them to random air pockets and refraction. But here's where it gets tricky. Last summer, a French glaciologist's drone inadvertently filmed a rectangular opening in a remote ice cliff, leading to what appeared to be a distinct antechamber adorned with a massive glyph resembling a bare-headed warrior clutching a sun disk. When an expedition reached that location, they found the entrance sealed by new snowfall, the chamber inaccessible, and its secrets entombed once again. We still don't know how many hidden galleries remain, or what they might reveal. Imagine pressing your hand against the cool, undulating wall of a corridor lit only by headlamp, the carvings glowing faintly in the beam as if alive. The dripping of meltwater echoes like distant drums, and the cavern feels impossibly vast, both a frozen prison and a sanctuary. You might pause to trace the serpentine glyphs, feeling the grooves carved so deeply they catch your shadow, and wonder what ceremonies took place here beneath layers of ice that have since shifted and reformed countless times. Reflection creeps in. These carvings, like all the unsolved wonders of Alaska, remind us that human creativity can thrive in the harshest crucibles, leaving messages that challenge generations to come. We still don't know who the artisans were, what drove them to carve ice instead of stone, or what the labyrinth meant to them, and that uncertainty is part of the magic, drawing us back to the chilly depths with every new expedition. Beneath the cerulean waters of Cook Inlet lies the submerged ruins of Nannock's Rest, a city of stone that defies the relentless tides and freezes of Alaska's coastal expanse. Picture this: you're aboard a small research vessel, the morning sun shimmering on the waves as you peer through a diving mask into water so clear you can see columns and walls jutting from the seabed, like the skeleton of a drowned temple. Sonar scans first picked up the site in 1985, and subsequent dives revealed an underwater settlement sprawling nearly 2 acres, with stone foundations arranged in straight avenues, rectangular courtyards, and even what appears to be a central plaza with a pedestal carved from dark basalt. Radiocarbon dating of driftwood lodged in the crevices indicates human construction around 1500 BC, long before any known coastal civilization in the North Pacific. But the precision of the masonry rivals classical Mediterranean sites, with blocks cut to within millimeter tolerances and joined without mortar. Now, let's be fair, some marine geologists argue that seismic activity could fracture bedrock into angular slabs, later shifted by currents into block-like formations. Yet the patterns here are far too regular, walls running parallel for hundreds of feet, right-angle corners consistent across multiple structures, even alcoves hewn into cliff faces that seem designed for statues or ceremonial fires. And though ocean currents swirl fiercely through Cook Inlet, scour marks on the stones show minimal erosion, as if someone applied a sealant of unknown composition. We still don't know whether these builders possessed the technology to waterproof their monuments, or if the land once stood above sea level and only sank later. Local Dena'ina legends speak of a ghost harbor, where ancestral spirits lured fishermen to their doom with phantom fires on the cliffs. According to one version, Nannock's Rest was a prosperous port where traders gathered amber, obsidian, and jade from distant islands, exchanging them for furs and carved ivory. Artifacts recovered by divers include fragments of greenstone beads not native to Alaska, obsidian blades traceable to Japanese islands, and ceramic shards painted with swirling patterns unlike any native Alaskan pottery. Some anthropologists see this as evidence of trans-Pacific voyaging millennia before the Vikings, or indeed any seafaring culture known to history. Others caution that currents and shipwrecks could have carried stray artifacts into the settlement, contaminating the context. But when dozens of shards are found in stratified layers corresponding to dates centuries apart, the notion of intermittent contact becomes more persuasive. Picture yourself drifting above the plaza on an underwater scooter, bubbles rising like fleeting ghosts as you hover over a sunken altar carved with reliefs of serpents and polar bears entwined. Schools of fish dart through collapsed archways, their scales catching the diver's light like liquid silver. One chamber, accessible only through a narrow fissure, contains what looks like a grotto shrine, a stone basin stained with red ochre and ringed by post holes that once held carved wooden poles. Could this have been a place of ritual bloodletting? Or perhaps offerings to appease a sea deity thought to control the tides and storms? Some scholars propose that Nannock's Rest was abandoned after a massive earthquake caused rapid subsidence, sending the city plummeting beneath the waves in a single cataclysmic event. Radiocarbon dates from coral and mollusk shells encrusted on the walls seem to corroborate a sudden inundation around 900 BC. Yet no tsunami deposits have been found onshore to match that timeline, leaving the cause of the submergence a mystery. Transitioning from sea to shore, terrestrial surveys nearby uncovered a network of dry stone walls and foundations that mirror the underwater layout, suggesting the settlement extended above the high tide line before sinking. Excavators found human remains in shallow graves, buried with jewelry of bone and metal, their skulls bearing trepanation holes, primitive but deliberate cranial surgeries. Was this community practicing ancient medical rites, or ritualistic dehorning intended to open portals to the spirit world? Some medical historians point to healed margins around the trepanation sites, suggesting patients survived the procedure, indicating a surprisingly advanced understanding of anatomy and antisepsis. Still, for all the meticulous excavation reports and peer-reviewed papers, no surgical instruments have been found, no flint scalpels, no metal probes. We still don't know what tools they used, or how they cauterized wounds in such a frigid environment. The mythic element emerges most strikingly in the occasional discovery of carved ivory tusks bearing bas-relief maps that mark routes from Nanuk's Rest to islands in the Aleutians and beyond to the Kuriles chain. The maps feature runic-like symbols that defy decipherment, alternating with pictograms of whales and giant sea serpents. Linguists have tried to parse them as proto-logosyllabic scripts, but without a Rosetta Stone, they remain stubbornly opaque. Could these be records of epic voyages, mythical accounts of battles with leviathans, or navigational charts used by ancient mariners? Picture yourself clutching a fragment of that ivory, the surface worn smooth by centuries underwater, and wondering what stories it held before it sank to the bottom of Cook Inlet. Reflecting on Nanuk's Rest, we confront the paradox of human tenacity. Here was a people who built a thriving coastal city in one of the harshest climates on Earth, mastered maritime construction, possibly conducted cranial surgery, and painted their stories on durable ivory scrolls, then vanished, leaving only stone and bone for us to puzzle over. Their city challenges our definitions of civilization, and forces us to consider whether the cradle of complex societies extended into these frozen waters long before history began. We still don't know why they sank their own metropolis, who they worshipped in that grotto shrine, or what language they spoke beneath the sea. And as you ascend from the depths, water streaming from your gear, the sun glints off the waves, reminding you that some wonders lie hidden, not in distant galaxies or uncharted rainforests, but just below the surface of the familiar seas we think we know. We still don't know. Imagine trekking through the driftwood-strewn mudflats of the Susitna River Delta at dawn, when the fog clings low to the water's edge and the only sound is the distant cry of a harlequin duck. Somewhere beneath your boots lies the buried entrance to the Valley of Sleeping Giants, a hidden expanse where enormous stone effigies, hewn from sandstone bedrock, lie half-submerged in peat bogs, their colossal faces eerily blank, eyes turned skyward toward the Alaska Range. The site was first noted by gold prospectors in 1911, when heavy rains exposed the top of a massive humanoid head, its scale dwarfing any known human sculpture by more than tenfold. Subsequent surveys mapped at least 7 giant figures ranging from 30 to 50 feet in length, their torsos jutting from the marsh, as if frozen mid-slumber. Radiocarbon analysis of wood tools found amid stone chips dates their carving to approximately 2200 BC, overlapping the old copper culture by several centuries. Yet the valley's sheer magnitude defies easy explanation. How did prehistoric stonemasons, lacking metal chisels, manage to carve such titanic forms out of solid bedrock? Some scholars theorize the figures were fashioned using fire setting, a technique of heating rock with wood fires then dousing it with cold water to induce fracturing, while others propose that an advanced tool technology utilizing powdered quartz and abrasive leather straps enabled precision carving. Archaeologists uncovered fragments of an abrasive compound, fine quartz dust mixed with native fats, scattered around the largest statue's base, suggesting deliberate tool production. But no complete tools have been recovered, and the distribution of the dust seems haphazard, as if multiple workshops sprang up and vanished in quick succession. We still don't know exactly how they achieved such craftsmanship, or why they abandoned their chisels and left the carvings to erode beneath the peat. Now, let's be fair. Some geologists argue these effigies are natural hoodoos sculpted by millennia of wind and water erosion, later embellished by opportunistic hands to resemble humanoid forms. Yet the symmetry of the limbs, the curvature of the arches marking shoulders and hips, and the consistent orientation, each face gazing eastward to welcome the rising sun, strongly indicate intentional design. Transitional channels carved around the figure's perimeters suggest water once flowed through the valley in a regulated pattern, perhaps to animate the statues during seasonal floods. One hypothesis posits that floodwaters would partially submerge the effigies, making them appear to awaken at certain times of the year. Critics counter that the channels are too shallow to create such an effect, and flooding on that floodplain rarely exceeds 6 inches. But even the skeptics acknowledge the channel's deliberate layout, marked by stone-lined sluices that still hold shallow standing pools in summer. We still don't know whether water and art were fused in a shared ritual, or if the channels serve purely practical drainage functions. Local Athabascan legends speak of earth giants, ancient protectors carved from the mountains by Sky Father himself, destined to slumber until the land needed their strength again. In one oral account, recounted by an elder in 1954, the giants formed a barrier against rogue spirits, their stone bodies imbued with talismanic power. Enthusiasts have conducted electromagnetic ground surveys seeking hidden talismans or buried offerings near the statue's bases, detecting anomalies that some interpret as metal caches, perhaps copper plaques or ceremonial blades, but coring the anomalies produced only waterlogged peat and fractured rock. But here's where it gets tricky. In 2003, a collapsed section of the largest statue revealed what appeared to be a carved chamber beneath the knee, its roof supported by stone columns no thicker than your wrist. Explorers lowering a camera cable filmed walls inscribed with dozens of shallow grooves, potentially representing tally marks or star charts. By the time archaeologists returned with excavation permits, regulatory wetlands protections had sealed off the site, and heavy spring rains buried the chamber once more. We still don't know what secrets that hidden room held, or whether those grooves map celestial events or seasonal hunts. Picture yourself standing atop one of the outcroppings, flat boots sinking slightly into the spongy peat, the cold mist swirling around your ankles as shafts of sunlight strike the giant head at perfect right angles, casting its visage into sharp relief. You can almost hear the echoes of chanting drifting through the valley, feel the shiver of stone muscles come to life. And yet, as you trace a fingertip along the weathered cheekbone, its surface so smooth it glows under your touch, you're struck by the odd absence of any quarry marks or spoil piles. Where did the debris from such monumental carving go? One theory suggests workers transported the excess stone downstream to reinforce riverbanks or build embankments, but no corresponding stone walls or riprap structures have been located within a 100-mile radius. We still don't know how they managed the debris, or why they left the valley strewn with effigies rather than clearing the site when their work was done. Reflecting on the Valley of Sleeping Giants, you sense that this was no casual art project but a monumental declaration, an assertion of human ambition on a scale no other prehistoric culture in North America attempted. The giants stand as silent sentinels, guardians turned to stone, hints of a lost worldview that bound art, astronomy, and landscape into a single grand vision. Perhaps these titans were meant to remind hunters of the land's living spirit, or to impart a sense of wonder that shaped communal identity across generations. Still, for all the surveys and sediment cores, the elites and commoners who planned and secured this site remain nameless phantoms, architects of a dream carved into bedrock and peat. We still don't know. And so we come to the end of our journey, one that has taken us from the mist-veiled coasts of Kodiak Island to the frostbitten depths of glacial cathedrals, across the sunken avenues of drowned cities, and into the silent gaze of titanic stone sentinels slumbering in their marshy beds. Along the way, we've encountered mysteries that mock the very idea of settled history, questions that refuse to sit quietly beneath textbook timelines or peer-reviewed footnotes. These are not just archaeological footnotes or cultural oddities. They are windows into an ancient world that once thrived in Alaska's frozen heart, a world of astronomers without telescopes, engineers without blueprints, navigators without compasses, and artists without paper or pigment. And through it all, a single thread has held fast, a refusal to be explained. For every theory offered, another question rises. The stone's circle aligned to the sun, precise beyond its time, was it the work of forgotten astronomers, or simply an accident of placement? The copper beads traded across continents, proof of ancient commerce or a coincidence of natural deposits. The labyrinth of Taku, echoing with frozen glyphs, an ice-carved sanctuary or an illusion shaped by shifting ice and human imagination? The underwater metropolis, proof of early engineering lost to the sea, or a haunting of natural geology misread by hopeful eyes. And those sleeping giants carved into bedrock, were they guardians, gods, or the echoes of a civilization trying to leave behind something that would outlive even memory? The skeptics remind us to be cautious, to avoid the lure of fantasy. And they are right, to a point. We must test, measure, question. We must dig carefully, document thoroughly, compare endlessly. But still, there are moments when the evidence resists our methods. When the radiocarbon dates don't quite line up. When the isotopes don't match known migration routes. When a language appears that no root or grammar can decipher. In those moments, even the most cautious researcher must pause and admit, we still don't know. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the value of these ancient mysteries lies not in what they solve, but in what they awaken in us, a rekindling of that very human ache to wonder. To stand in the chill of a glacier's heart and trace carvings made by hands long vanished. To dive into an inlet and drift over stones set by people whose names are lost but whose vision remains. To look into the face of a carved giant and feel something stir that has nothing to do with science and everything to do with all. Because these mysteries are not just about Alaska. They're about all of us. They ask us to consider that intelligence, creativity, and ambition were never the sole property of modern civilization. That long before our cities rose, people here were watching the stars, mapping coastlines, shaping their world with tools and dreams we can barely begin to understand. That knowledge doesn't always follow a straight line. Sometimes it flares up in the most unlikely places, on a cliff, in a cave, beneath the sea, and then disappears, leaving only puzzles and legends in its wake. And there's something beautiful in that. Something deeply human. So as we wrap this journey, we offer no final answers. Instead, we offer an invitation. Keep digging. Keep walking those foggy trails. Keep listening to the winds that echo through ancient valleys. Keep your eyes open for the impossible. Because somewhere, beneath a slab of stone, or frozen in a wall of ice, or washed up in a tide pool, another mystery waits. Another chapter still unwritten. Another voice calling softly from a world long gone. Some secrets still lie just beneath your feet.